Good evening all and welcome. Before we begin today's video, I would like to wish a very happy birthday to both Maria Akras and Mato Star. I hope you both have had a wonderful day and that these stories are to your liking. If you'd like your birthday shout out and a bunch of other cool perks, feel free to check out Patreon, link in the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When my parents got divorced, my mum moved us into a brand new house. A fresh start for all of us. It was me and my 3 younger siblings, but since I was the oldest, I got my own room. I remember being very excited about it, especially because my mum had surprised me with brand new furniture as a birthday present. The centerpiece was this tall wardrobe with a full-length mirror on the front. At first, everything was normal. The house was new, clean, and didn't have the usual creaks and groans that old houses had. But that didn't last. One night, not long after we moved in, I was lying on my side trying to fall asleep. The room was quiet, and the only light came from the street lamp outside, filtering faintly through the blinds. I was staring at the furniture, absent-mindedly watching the way the light dimly reflected off the mirror. I was just blinking, trying to drift off, and then I saw her. Between one blink and the next, she was just there. A little blonde girl, maybe 9 years old, standing in front of the mirror wearing a delicate pink dress. Her blonde ringlets bounced as she twirled slightly, admiring herself in the glass. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't even scary. She just wasn't supposed to be there. I watched her for a few seconds, and she fluffed out her skirt, her face calm and distant, almost as if she was completely unaware I was there at all. And just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. There was no fade out, no slow disappearance, just one blink she was there and the next she wasn't. I didn't scream, I didn't even move. I just lay there wide-eyed, trying to convince myself I was half asleep or hallucinating. Maybe this was just a waking dream. But I never slept with my back to that side of the room after that. I tried to forget about it. And I did. For 5 years. Fast forward to a camping trip with my dad, his wife, her kids, and a family friend. We were all sitting around the campfire, trading spooky stories, laughing and trying to scare each other with the usual stuff. Then one of my younger sisters speaks up. She starts telling a story about her old house, the one where we'd lived with my mum before she moved again. She said she'd gone into her closet one day to grab something, and she saw a little blonde girl playing with some toys. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. At first, I didn't say anything. I just stared at her as she casually went on, describing how they locked eyes for a moment and how it wasn't scary, just unsettling. And then she'd said something that made my blood turn cold. She was wearing a pink dress. Without thinking, I blurted out, "With lace? Hair was in ringlets?" My sister froze. Our eyes met. And suddenly, we were finishing each other's sentences. Her age, the way she looked, the calm, almost peaceful feeling we both had when we saw her. We had seen the exact same girl. But here's the thing. We never talked about it, not once. I'd never told her what I'd seen. I hadn't told anyone. As we pieced together our matching stories, the rest of the group around the campfire just stared at us, their faces pale in the flickering firelight. They didn't believe us. They thought we were just really good storytellers who had planned all this out. But the way my sister and I looked at each other, we knew we hadn't imagined it. She was real, and I still can't explain it. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that wherever that girl came from, she hasn't just left. She was there, and for all I know, still is. We live tucked away near the edge of the woods, where blueberry farms sprawl out in every direction, and the only neighbors are deer, raccoons, and the occasional coyote. I'm used to country silence, but that night something about it was wrong. I was outside when I heard it, a sound that tore through the air like claws against metal. A long, shrieking wail that made my skin crawl and my lungs lock up. Not a coyote, not an owl, not even close. This was something deeper, and the hairs stood up on the back of my neck as I turned heel and bolted back inside. I called my mum right away. "I just heard something," I told her, voice tight. "It came from up the woods, and it scared the crap out of me." She said she was already on her way over and hung up. Minutes later, her headlights cut through the long gravel driveway. But before she could even park, my ex-boyfriend came stumbling towards her car from the road, eyes wide like a cornered animal, breath fogging the cold air. He looked pale, unsteady. He ran up to her window, banging on it before she could even roll it down. "Is this a joke?" he said, voice cracking. "Tell me this is a joke." "What are you talking about?" she asked, and I could hear the edge in her voice. "My mom doesn't scare easy." "I just saw her," he said, pointing back down the road towards him. "She was walking towards me, she was right there. Same jacket, same hair, same walk, but she didn't say anything, just turned and walked into the woods." My mum looked at him like he'd lost his mind. He looked like he agreed. He swore it was me. He said I was less than 50 feet away when it stopped, looked at him, and then without a word pivoted on her heel and disappeared between the trees. No flashlight, no crunch of leaves, just swallowed whole by the woods. But I was inside the entire time. I heard the scream, and then he saw me. The woods didn't go anywhere. There's no trail there, no reason you'd walk into them unless you're looking for something. We both stayed up that night, talking in hushed voices. He kept swearing he wasn't hallucinating, that her eyes locked onto his, and that there was something in the way she moved. Not wrong exactly, just off. Too smooth, too quiet. Like she wasn't walking on the ground, but floating just above it. He stopped coming around after that. Said he didn't feel safe on our land anymore. I don't know what I heard, or what he saw, but I don't blame him. My oldest brother moved out when I was a little child. I can't even remember him living in our house. I live with my dad and sister. Anyway, he got into trouble with the law because of a domestic dispute involving drinking, and his wife kicked him out. My dad is a saint, so he let him move back in with us. Everything was fine at first, for the first few weeks. We would play card games and talk and watch TV. Then it came time for him to be sentenced to go to prison. He only ended up spending 2 months there, but when he came back, he had an entirely different demeanor and energy. The only way I could describe it is negativity and darkness. At first, you could chalk it up to him having a negative experience, but he would reminisce seemingly fondly about his experience and claim that it was no big deal. My sister and I are very spiritually sensitive. It runs in the family on the female side, and there were 3 distinct instances that solidified the idea that there was more going on than anything emotional or physical. The first instance, I was walking up the basement stairs when I heard footsteps at the top. I glanced up to see what looked like my brother crossing the threshold of the doorframe. I could even tell you he was wearing blue jeans, a red polo shirt, and yellow Timberland-style boots. I walked upstairs and looked around the corner expecting to find my brother, when my dad tells me he's actually 2 hours away in Buffalo. My dad and I were home alone and he was wearing a blue shirt. On the second occasion, I had just fed the cats and decided to head upstairs to go to bed. I get halfway up the stairs before I hear a man's voice angrily yelling at me from the exact same place in the hallway where I saw the apparition. The third instance, my sister and I were pulling an all-nighter on the couch because I had a doctor's appointment in the morning. My sister says she has to pee to get up, and she walks towards the hallway, then immediately proceeds to turn around and sit back down. She starts facing the wall and crying. I ask her what's wrong, and after some coaxing, she tells me that she saw a huge shadow figure cross the hallway right at the top of the basement stairs. So that is all 3 distinct manifestations, all in the same spot with 2 different witnesses. Since it scared my sister, I decided the next day to cleanse that area and also the space where my brother was staying. I cleansed the entire basement with sage smoke and blessed salt water. Never had anything happen again after that. He moved out shortly after. I put together a few years later that it was a fractured part of himself, like a PK manifestation. As far as I know, he's still walking around, leaving pieces of himself wherever he goes. I was maybe 9 or 10 when this happened. We had just moved to a strange, isolated little neighborhood in West Virginia, tucked right over a massive steel bridge. We weren't moving into our own place, but into a big old house with some close family friends. It had 4 bedrooms if you counted the office, a basement, 2 bathrooms, and this strange attic/walk-in closet. It was older, creaky, and it felt a little off. To get to the room my mum and I were staying in, you had to go through the upstairs bathroom, then through the walk-in closet. Our room sat behind all that, almost hidden, and on the far side of the room was another door that connected to a completely separate bedroom. To me, it felt like the house had been rearranged in a hurry, like the walls were built to hide things. When we first moved in, the adults told us something that stuck in the back of my mind. The previous tenants, maybe even owners, had apparently practiced some kind of voodoo or ritual magic. I'm not sure what it was, but the evidence was everywhere. Dolls. So many dolls. Plastic baby dolls, porcelain dolls, Barbie dolls, even just heads, loose and dusty. Some were hanging by their necks from strings in the closet. There were bundles of them stuffed in drawers, eyes wide open, arms frozen mid-reach. Right outside our bedroom door were 4 pencils, taped to the wall. Each one had a yarn head glued to the top, like a tiny, rough-made effigy. Each pencil had a name written down on all sides of it. There was just something wrong about them. All of us, even the adults, agreed not to mess with them. It just didn't feel safe. But of course, one of the adults, one of the dads, tore them down anyway, said it was just creepy junk. And after that, things changed. Our bedroom door refused to stay shut. The latch didn't catch right, and we didn't have a lock. I was still so small at the time that I was using a full car seat, and we wedged it up against the door to keep it from swinging wide open in the night. Just enough so it stayed cracked, not fully open. One night, most of the adults went out to a bar. Only 2 stayed home, along with their toddler who was maybe 2 or 3 years old. I stayed back in the bedroom watching my iPad. At some point, I accidentally turned it off, and I didn't know the password to get back in. I tried the TV, but it wouldn't turn on. Suddenly, I was just sitting there in silence, surrounded by my toys, and this thick stillness. And about 10 minutes later it happened. The door, the one to our bedroom that was held in place by a car seat, flew open. It didn't open slowly and creakily. It flew, almost exploded. The sound of it slamming against the wall was so loud, so sudden, that I screamed and immediately burst into tears. No one came. Later they tried to tell me it was the toddler. Maybe he had used the bathroom and pushed it open, but if that were true I would have seen him. He would have had to sprint back down the hall. I would have heard him, but there was nothing. Just the sound of the door crashing open and then silence again. After that, I started noticing other things. My toys weren't where I left them. Whole sets would be moved or rearranged. My favorite stuffed animal would be facing a different position. One of my dolls, an old one I never played with, was sitting up in the middle of the floor one morning. I know I didn't put it there, and the worst? I couldn't take a shower with the bathroom door closed anymore. The glass on the shower was frosted, but not enough to hide what I saw. A figure. A tall, still, human-shaped shadow just standing outside the door, not moving, not speaking, just watching. But when I flung the door open, no one, not a sound, not a footprint. We only lived there for a few months. Things between the families got tense, even abusive, and we left in a hurry. But sometimes I think about that house, the dolls, the names on those pencils, and the moment the door exploded open with no one there. And I wonder, what did we stir up when we moved in? And I wonder if it ever left. The year is 1993. My parents had 3 kids at the time, my oldest sister, my oldest brother and me. 2 more sisters came later on. My parents are closing on the house. This is where it started. As closing was coming to an end, my parents were asked if they had any more questions about the property. My mum asked Mr. Geller, the seller, if anyone had passed away in the house. Mr. Geller's response was, "Why, are you scared of ghosts?" I guess that was the end of their closing. So we moved in. It was a hood city, but our neighborhood was one of those movie neighborhoods where all the houses looked the same, except for the one we just bought, and everyone knew everyone and everything that went on. All the houses in the neighborhood were single-story, 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses, with a kitchen, living room and dining room. Mr. Geller added on to the house that we bought when he owned it, and it was 2-story, 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, with a beauty salon and a workshop attached. And our house happened to be the largest in the neighborhood. So we get settled in the first week. My bedroom was supposed to be the last room on the left upstairs, but from day one I was terrified of that room, so me and my bro shared a room, the last one on the right. After we got unpacked and settled in, we decided to take a stroll around the block. We closed up the house, turned the lights off, shut the front door, and headed out on our walk to interact with the neighborhood. We made our way around the 5 roads that made up our community, and as we made our way back to the house, we could see it in the distance. All of the lights were on in the other house, and the front door was open. My mum made us stay back about 2 houses up, while my dad went and checked out the house. When my dad gave me the clear, my mum called the police to make the report. They also checked the house and didn't find anything or anyone, so it was just let go. I believe this was one of the first signs of paranormal activity in the house. I don't know how much time had passed. It was a short time, maybe a few days, but we did the typical welcome to the neighborhood housewarming party at our house, and a lot of neighbors came to visit. Our next-door neighbor Bill was hesitant about coming inside and stayed on the front porch, but eventually came inside, sat on the couch and drank some beer. One of the downstairs bedrooms that was attached to the living room was mine and my brother's playroom. TV, Sega, Nintendo, a hamster cage was also in there, but during this party I decided to put my hamster in the ball, and Bill was loosened up by this time. Well, said hamster rolled around in his ball and made its way into the living room, and Bill got quiet. My parents noticed this about Bill and asked if he was alright. I guess Bill wasn't accustomed to hamsters and their toys, and all he saw was the ball. Bill said, "If that ball moves one more time, I'm leaving and won't be back." Well, about that time my hamster turned into the Flash and took off in his ball. Bill flew out the door and went home. He stuck to his word, and for years until he moved, he would never enter our home, would only come into our driveway or our yard. Sometimes, but rarely, he would come onto the front porch even after my mum told him, "It's a hamster in a ball." We were there for a few months, living the 90s family life, and my mum is outside and starts a conversation with a lady from across the street. We called her and her husband Mima and Papa. This is when Mima informs Mum that 2 ladies have passed away in that house from cancer, Mr. Geller's wife and daughter. Mima also goes to say that Mr. Geller was a weird guy and had secret rooms built in the house behind bookshelves, secret doors, and a full old-school fireman setup, fireman axe, fire hose on a reel behind the wall. She believed it was the wall that the stairs were on. Some people knew about the secret rooms, so I guess it wasn't entirely a secret. My mum invited Mima over one day, and she was going around the house showing us some of the rooms that were turned into regular rooms before he sold us the house. One was in our computer room, which had stairs to go upstairs. Right beside the stairs was a built-in bookshelf. That was one of the secret rooms that went under the stairs into our laundry room. The bookshelf had been screwed shut, but if you went through the door on the other side, you could see the back of the bookshelf that still had hinges and was screwed shut to the wall on the other side so it couldn't be opened. The upstairs bedroom, my bedroom, you could see a faint crack in the wall that went over the stairs in the shape of the door. It was sealed with sheetrock, and Mima told us that that's where Mr. Geller kept his safe. I still didn't like that room, but my mum made me and my brother move into it anyway because it was the biggest room and we were sharing. So we moved into the room upstairs on the left, my original bedroom, and made it our own. TV, stereo, bunk beds, toys. I stayed on the top bunk and my brother was bottom. This is when the dreams started. Every night I had a dream. I couldn't really explain it to my parents, but I tried to. I would always tell my mum that I was stuck and couldn't get out. I remembered these dreams like they were last night. I remember walking around the house in my dream, calling for help but couldn't talk. I was there and could see my family and things happening, but I was just stuck and couldn't get out or move. I remember trying to pick up the phone to call 911 but couldn't. This went on for a long time and eventually turned into a different dream. Same situation, but now I was able to move around the house and walk and talk, but I was scared. I would hide in places around the house, behind doors, under beds, behind furniture, and would be peeking out watching this shadow go around the house and scare or hurt my family. I would always wake up crying or screaming, and my mum would come and get me and let me sleep with her. Eventually, my mum would start getting on me and telling me to go back to bed and stop having bad dreams. But I couldn't stop them. My brother started sleepwalking. He had never sleepwalked before in his life. He would always get up and walk around the house in the middle of the night, and we'd wake up in the morning and he'd be sleeping somewhere strange, like the hallway or in the tub. My mum took him to a doctor for sleepwalking, and after hearing the things going on, Mima gave us a cross to hang in our room. It helped for a little while, and the dreams stopped. One night my parents had some friends over, and they were all in the living room drinking and laughing and having a good time. My mum asked me to go upstairs and get something out of her room right beside mine, so I did. While I was upstairs, I heard a crash downstairs and another, then yelling. I ran downstairs to the entire living room in chaos. My mum's candles were flying off the fireplace shelf one by one. My parents were yelling, people were screaming, some had run outside, and a few were just frozen on the couch watching this happen. After it all stopped, a bunch of people left and the night was over. We never found out what caused it. Things were always weird in the house. Strange feelings, hearing things, seeing things. My little sisters were born while we lived there. They both had a lot of issues as babies. They cried all the time. One had medical issues that cleared up years later. And one night, my mum was bathing the youngest one, and my little sister's eyes rolled back in her head, and she stopped breathing and turned purple. My mum screamed for my dad, who was taking a nap in the room. He woke up, ran into the bathroom, picked up my sister, and she gasped and began crying. That was a moment of relief, but it was also a moment of confusion and fear. Nothing like it ever happened again. I remember another night. It was a weekend and I had a friend over. We were hanging out playing Super Nintendo in our room, and we heard the door open and someone coming up the stairs. We thought it was my dad coming to tell us to go to bed. The steps made it all the way up the stairs and stopped. No one ever appeared. We got up and looked and no one was there. We ran downstairs and found my parents in the kitchen and they told us no one had gone upstairs. We were freaked out and begged to sleep in the living room. Not long before we moved, I had another dream. I was hiding again. I was behind a couch in the living room watching this black shadow go around the house again and scare my family. I remember it was a stormy night, raining with lightning. My little sister was in her crib and crying, and my mum was trying to soothe her. My dad was in the bathroom shaving and I was hiding, watching. Then the shadow man came up behind my dad and cut him with a razor, and I woke up screaming. We moved not long after that dream, and I never had it again, and I never saw or heard anything strange after that. I drove by the house several years ago and met the guy who bought it. He said he hadn't experienced anything, but he also told me he had completely gutted the house and redid everything. He tore the house down to the frame, walls and all, and now it's a single-story, 3-bedroom house. Back in the 90s, my dad owned a handful of rental houses. When tenants moved out or passed on, my girlfriend and I were the cleanup crew. We'd go in, repaint, rip up carpet, and get the place livable again. There was one house, though, that I still think about. My dad had bought it years earlier, with a long-time renter already living there, an older man who kept to himself. When the guy passed away, my dad asked us to go in and start the rehab. Sounded routine, we'd done it plenty of times before. The weird started almost immediately. We began in the bedrooms, like always, priming the walls, tearing out the carpet. But we kept misplacing our carpet knives. We figured we'd rolled them up with the old flooring by mistake. So we got smart, switched our fluorescent orange cutters, and you'd have to be blind to miss them. Still, they kept disappearing right off the floor like they were never there. Next came the living room. We rolled back the carpet and stopped dead. The cork underfloor was soaked with dark stains, wide, irregular patches, the color of dried blood. Maybe someone butchered a deer in here, we joked, or a very large chicken. Still, we pressed on. I was painting the walls in the living room when I saw it. A human-shaped shadow move across the opposite wall. I turned, but no one was there. So I ran outside thinking someone was snooping around, maybe a meter reader or a nosy neighbor. But the street was empty. I circled the entire house, yard, alley, side gate, even peered over fences, and there was nothing. I went back in. We finished the job quickly after that. Both of us had that nervous, gut-deep sense that we weren't supposed to be there. And a few days later, my dad called. "What did you use to clean the place?" he asked. "'Cause it's full of flies." I went back and he wasn't exaggerating. Dozens of flies, maybe hundreds, swarming windows, light fixtures, even dead ones in piles along the floorboards. The smell was faint but sour. I scrubbed every flat surface with bleach and mortar, every wall, every counter, every cabinet. Next morning, flies again. The house didn't have a crawl space, it was built on a concrete slab, so we ruled out rodents or sewage. My dad figured maybe they were coming in through the cracks in the slab, so he sealed them. Every one. Used silica filler and caulk. Made it airtight, but it didn't matter. The flies returned. I vacuumed them up, piles of them, hundreds, no food, no trash. Yet they still came in. My dad had lived through the Great Depression, fought in World War II, and raised 10 kids. Built his life with calloused hands and stubborn grit. He wasn't superstitious and not one for ghost stories. But he sold that house immediately, didn't hesitate. He said, "I don't believe in that sort of thing, but I'm not stupid either." And I'm glad that was the last of it. I used to live in a massive centuries-old house, over 300 years old, with thick wooden beams and drafty hallways that groaned under the weight of time. Many people who visited claimed to experience odd things. Shadows were there that shouldn't be, doors creaking open by themselves, and a feeling of being watched. But me? I lived there for years and never experienced anything like that. I always chalked it up to an overactive imagination. A big old dark house, weird noises, it's easy to freak yourself out. But then there were stories that made me pause. My uncle, for one, he's not the kind of guy to embellish or tell tales. He's a man of science, logic and reason. Yet after staying over one night, he told me something that still makes my skin crawl. He'd gotten up late, unable to sleep, and went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. He filled the glass at the sink, turned around, and walked towards the other end of the room. But just as he was about to take a sip, he dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, but here's the strange part. There was no water, not a single drop. He swore up and down he had filled it, but the floor was bone dry. No spilled water, nothing, as if he'd never poured it in the first place. He tried to reason it away. Maybe he was tired, maybe he imagined filling the glass. But the unease in his voice when he told me, that wasn't something he could explain away. And then there was my moment. I didn't believe in ghosts, not until that night. I was sitting in the lounge reading, with the fire crackling softly in the hearth. The glow of the flames was coming, and the room felt warm despite the usual chill that seemed to creep through the house after dark. And then I heard a crash, a loud, violent crash from the next room. It wasn't the usual creak or groan of the old house settling. This was different and deliberate, jarring enough to make my heart pound. I jumped up and rushed into the room, half expecting to find something obvious. A fallen picture frame maybe, a tipped-over chair. But what I saw was a log. A massive piece of wood about 1 foot long and 4 to 5 inches in diameter, just lying in the middle of the floor. It looked like it had been part of some old furniture. I stared at it for a moment, completely confused. There was no broken furniture, nothing was out of place. My first thought was the fireplace, but that didn't make sense either. The fireplace had a very heavy guard in front of it, a solid barrier that covered everything except a small gap at the top. Even if a log had somehow shifted and rolled out, there was no way it could have ended up 15 feet away on the other side of the room. And then I thought, maybe something had dropped it down the chimney, a bird perhaps, but that was impossible too. There were no overhanging trees, and while birds occasionally nested in the chimney, there's no way a bird could have lifted a log that heavy and dropped it perfectly down the flue. The more I thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. I stood there staring at the log, trying to piece together some kind of logical explanation, but none of it added up. To this day, I have no idea how the log got there, and the more I think about it, the more unsettled I become. Maybe I was right all along. Maybe my uncle and all the others who had seen and heard things weren't just letting their imaginations run wild. Because that night something happened, and I have no explanation for it. I was 13 when this happened. My family lived in a small 1970s duplex in Calgary, Alberta. Nothing fancy. One normal evening, my twin sister and I decided to have a few friends over for a movie night. Totally innocent, popcorn, snacks, a few sodas, and I remember having a little crush on one of the people coming over, so I was maybe more excited than usual. There were 5 of us in total. We set up in the basement, which doubled as our hangout spot, just a couch, an old TV, and a wall that separated us from the laundry/utility room. It was cozy in that early 2000s kind of way, dimly lit, the hum of the water heater muffled behind the door. We put on some comedy that was popular for the time, and settled in for the night. As the evening wore on, 3 of our friends slowly drifted off to sleep. Eventually, it was just me and one other friend still awake. We sat next to each other on the couch, the movie playing out its final scene, the room darker than I realized until the credits started to roll. And then, it happened. Not even 2 minutes after the movie ending, out of the pitch-black laundry room, something floated into the living room. It was maybe the size of a softball, whitish blue, softly glowing, with a faint halo around it. It moved slowly and calmly, hovering at about chest height, maybe 5 feet off the ground. It drifted just a few feet into the room and then just stayed there, suspended in the air right in front of us. I don't know how long it lingered, 2, maybe 3 seconds, and time felt strange in that moment. Then just as slowly as it came, it turned and floated back into the laundry room, disappearing through the door. My friend and I just stared at each other. We didn't scream nor run, we didn't even speak. We just looked at each other in stunned silence. We didn't know what to say, but we had both seen it. And here's the strange part. I wasn't scared, not exactly. It didn't feel evil or threatening or even curious. It felt neutral, like it wasn't interested in us at all. We never spoke about it again. A few months later that summer, my family packed up and moved across the country. I lost touch with that friend completely, and it's been over 15 years now, and we haven't spoken since. But I do think about that night often. The glowing orb, the silence, the feeling that something passed through our space that wasn't supposed to be there, but it didn't care if it was seen. I know how this story sounds, If someone had told it to me, I'd probably assume they were sleep deprived, hallucinating, or misremembering something electrical and explainable. But I wasn't. And I swear on everything I know, it happened exactly as I described it. So now I ask, what was it? Has anyone seen anything like this? A floating orb glowing in the dark without heat, or sound, or purpose? Because to this day, I still don't know what passed through our basement that night, or why it chose to reveal itself to us. About 5 years ago, myself and my fiancée, as well as one of our mutual best friends called Kyle, had been living together for a few years, and at the height of lockdown during the pandemic, decided to start a round table style stream on Twitch, where we talked all manner of nerdy things. We decided about 6 months into this to look for a house as, at the time, 3 people, 2 dogs, and a whole semi-professional Steam setup were crammed into a 2-bed apartment, and our lease was coming to an end anyway. We ended up signing a lease for a 5-bed home which came with an insanely affordable price tag. The house was strange as hell, in the sense of the layout. 2 stories, with each story split into 2 sub-floors, so essentially a 4-story home, including a fully furnished basement that was about a half-story lower than the ground floor. When I say fully furnished, I mean it was essentially a full-on basement apartment, including a small living room, bed and bath, and laundry room. Kyle claimed that for himself. The main living room and kitchen were on the top, 3rd floor, and half a story up was the master suite and 2 smaller bedrooms. Very odd in general, but it worked, as we all had a bedroom and home office, and we set up the basement living room as our streaming studio. The night we moved in, I was upstairs unpacking boxes in the master suite, while my fiancé and some friends were down in the garage organizing storage boxes. I remember the hair on the back of my neck stood up, suddenly, and out of nowhere, something made a very loud "ha" sound in my ear, almost like someone whisper yelling something. I immediately booked it down the garage, and it was explained away as me being overtired, or maybe hearing a plastic bag rustling in the room. I wasn't convinced, but I didn't want to push the point. Not long after that, our dog started to act up. For context, there was a very odd window in the master shower. It was large and had no screen or blind, and was literally in the wall facing out over the side of the house, and could be seen into directly by both our next-door neighbors and the neighbor whose backyard was catty corner from ours. I'm a tall gal, but luckily it was high enough in the wall that I wasn't putting on a show in the shower. The master bathroom also wasn't separated by a door, it was just an archway in the bathroom from the bedroom area. We had both agreed that the window gave us an unsettling feeling of being watched at night, even as it was on the 2nd floor. But then our dog started growling in the darkness of the bathroom at night, as we decided to hang curtains to mitigate the creepiness factor of that. They would still sometimes push their heads past the curtain from the bathroom and growl, which was lovely. The next issue that started to occur was an overwhelming feeling of being watched while I was alone for the basement. Kyle would often travel for weeks at a time, as his job was fully remote, and he would go and stay with his significant other for as long as a month at a time. It wasn't an issue when we first moved in. I would go on about my laundry and nothing was weird. But as time passed, I would feel an actual gut-churning dread if I was in the basement. And each time I went into the laundry room, regardless of the AC running or any other outside factors, the door to the room would inevitably slowly be pushed shut behind me. It never once happened when another person was down there with me, but it struck as primal fear in me each time I was down there alone. The door closing in and of itself was not scary per se, but coupled with the overwhelming feeling like I was being watched, turned into the intense feeling of being hunted, like something wanted to trap me in the room. The worst occurrence happened late into the night one weekend, long after we had all returned to normal for work. All of us are night owls, and as such I was still awake at around 3 a.m, watching a movie in my bedroom while my fiancé was across the hall in his office playing video games. I must have drifted off to sleep and been awoken by something in the movie. But I had my first and only experience with sleep paralysis that night. I couldn't talk, couldn't move, struggled to breathe. What was likely only 30 seconds or so felt like hours, but once it passed I called for my fiancé and he helped calm me down from such a scary experience. I later turned in and went to sleep sometime around 4 in the morning, only for him to burst out the room, shake me awake and ask if I had been in his office. I'm sure I had a grumpy look on my face when I asked if he recalled how I was asleep and he had to wake me up to ask me, but he looked actually shaken, which woke me up pretty fast. He told me he had been in the middle of a match when he saw someone walk into his office from the door behind his chair. He wears glasses, and glasses wearers knows you can sometimes catch reflections like that, and assumed it was me waiting for his match to end. Typically, if it's a non-emergency situation, I wait, and then he'll move his noise-cancelling headphones to the side so we can talk. He went about playing until something suddenly jerked the back of his office chair backwards so hard that he almost fell. Other weird things happened in that house, bumps in the night, taps on the walls from the attic, our dogs being weird and sometimes either not wanting to go into the backyard at night or not wanting to come inside from the backyard, feeling like you shouldn't go down the long hallway upstairs at night. We stayed there for 3 years, and the energy of the house got progressively worse and worse throughout our time there, but eventually we moved out and haven't had anything happen since. I'm not sure what was in that house or what happened there before we moved in, but I've never experienced anything like it before, and hope I never do again. It started around a year ago. We live in a solid brick house, me, my siblings, and my parents. It's an older home. At first we thought it was just something in the closets in my parents' room. Maybe the wooden doors expanding in the cold or settling. But then the noise came again. The knocking. Clearer, heavier. It wasn't coming from the closet doors, it was coming from inside the wall itself. We started to hear scratching too, not just soft, incidental noises, long, deliberate claws dragging against wood like something trapped or angry. We assumed mice, a cat maybe, although we don't own one. But no matter how long we listened, no one ever saw anything. My father even checked the wall. Inside the closet, behind an old shelf, he found a small hole, already sealed before we even moved in, bricked over like something had tried to lock something inside. Then came the flies. It started with one, then more, then suddenly swarms of them in my parents' room, thick, slow black flies. In our culture, flies aren't pests, they're omens, symbols of witchcraft or a demonic presence. It got so bad we had to keep the door shut just to contain them. Eventually, my father found something strong enough to kill all of them off. I don't remember what it was, but it worked. The flies died, and just like that the scratching stopped. The knocking went silent, and we hoped it was over. But we were wrong, because this February it started again. The same knocking, the same scratching, the same place in the wall, but now it was more cunning. I tried to record it. I'd lie in bed with my phone in hand, finger hovered over the record button waiting. I could hear the knocks clear as day right behind the headboard, but the moment I moved, the moment I spoke or even turned on the flashlight, it would go dead silent, as if it knew I was trying to catch it. There was one night I had the phone ready, positive I'd finally record it, and I waited in complete darkness. And that night nothing, not one knock, not one scratch, almost like it was waiting me out. The scariest part? These walls are made of solid brick, no crawl space, no hollow gaps for something to nest in. Whatever it is, it's not something that should be able to move like that, not inside there. We still don't know what it is, but I know this. It only comes back during this time of year, and whatever it is doesn't want to be seen, and it never knocks if you're watching. I lived in an old pre-war building in New York City. A massive structure with thick walls, narrow hallways, and creaky wooden floors. My daughter and I lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor, and every night after putting her to bed in her little room, I would collapse on my own bed and zone out to some mindless TV show. My bed was angled so that from where I lay, I could watch a sliver of the hallway outside our door in my peripheral vision. And every single night without fail, I saw it. A tall dark shadow would glide gently past the door, just barely within the edge of my sight. It moved slowly, almost floating, like a heavy curtain drifting in a breeze. The shape was impossibly tall, with long, slender limbs that seemed to stretch and ripple unnaturally. My heart would leap every time. A jarring jolt of cold fear tightened my chest. I would snap my head towards the hallway, eyes wide and searching, but there was never anything there, just the dim glow of the hallway light bulb swinging faintly, casting long, flickering shadows. At first I was terrified, but after a few months I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, an eye glitch, a shadow from the peeling wallpaper, or some warped corner of my vision playing cruel games. Eventually I stopped flinching when I saw it. It became part of the nightly rhythm, like an unwelcome but familiar visitor that I simply learned to ignore. We lived there for several years, and the shadow never stopped appearing. I never spoke of it to anyone. Who would believe a tired mum in a creaky New York City apartment? Then just a week before we moved out, after all the boxes were packed and the apartment was half empty, the shadow came back with a vengeance. But this time it wasn't me who saw it. One night, my daughter and I were lying on the bed watching TV in the dim light of the room. She was sprawled out of the foot of the bed, quietly playing with her dolls. The apartment was eerily silent, except for the low murmur of the television. Out of the corner of my eye, there it was, that same tall, slender shadow, drifting past the door like a wraith. But this time, my daughter suddenly sat up, her small face pale and wide-eyed, and she whispered, "Mummy, who was that?" My blood ran cold as I bolted upright. "You saw it? You saw the shadow?" She nodded, unable to take her eyes off the doorway, her small hands gripping the blanket. That was it. I grabbed my daughter, and we packed up the last few things in a frantic rush, my mind racing with dread. We left that night and stayed with her grandmother, never once looking back. The building behind us stood silent and indifferent, but I knew the shadow was still there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the next set of eyes to catch its impossible shape moving just beyond sight. We broke lease and never returned. I mean, wouldn't you? I've always been interested in the dark, creepy, weird and paranormal stuff from a young age, and developed a love for horror films as well. I watched Child's Play and Night of the Living Dead as my first two horror films and loved them. As I've gotten older, I started to branch out beyond horror films and watched paranormal stuff involving aliens, cryptids, demons, and general high strangeness. While I've always been eager to learn new things, I've never considered myself a believer. I want to see it to believe it, you know. So I call myself an open-minded skeptic. I've lived in the same house for most of my life, and there have been things over the past years that have been odd or weird, but I'd never call anything proof of paranormal activity. Swearing you've seen a shadow move by you in the basement, hearing someone talking when you're home alone, the regular spooky stuff all hauntings have. But nothing ever made it clear to me that my house was haunted and ghosts were real, until an event a few years ago that scared the ever-loving crap out of me, because I had no way to explain it. So I live in Ohio, and July and August can bring miserable heat, and I have no central air conditioning, so open windows or fans were what I was used to. My mum was working third shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., so it was me, my brother, and it was around 2 to 3 in the morning, and my brother was already in bed a few hours at this point. I was ready to sleep, so I started shutting off the lights around and checking the doors, making sure everything was locked. The entire main floor of the house was dark aside from the hall light. So, to describe the layout of my house, the hallway has a sort of uppercase eye to it. To the left is my mum's room, to the right is the kitchen, and behind me, the living room and dining room. Then there's a hallway. At the end, on the left, are the stairs leading to the upstairs and my room, and to the right is the bathroom. Going straight is our back porch. To get a breeze, we had to have the porch door open at night when it was cooler. I walked down the hallway with the hallway light as the only light source I had. I get to the porch door to shut it, and immediately in the darkness of the porch, something makes a sound that I compare to movies, when someone is running to an elevator as the doors are closing and they're trying to get someone in the elevator to hold the door, a sort of mumbled, "Wait, no." And this faceless audio was right there at the door, as if to try and get me to leave the door open. I felt a rush of air come at me as this mumbling was uttered. Getting goosebumps as I share this in total fear, I slammed the door as hard as I could and ran down the hallway into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. At that moment, I expected it was some sort of intruder who had broken into my back porch and was trying to get back into the house to do God knows what. And I stood in the dark, just out of sight of the back door, and listened, waiting to hear a person either try and get in the house or exit the porch, and it was just silence. Nothing. I walked around the darkness, looking out of windows for something. I walked into my mum's room and peeked through her window to the view of the porch and still see nothing, hear nothing, just silence. I paced around the darkness for a good 15 minutes on edge, waiting for something, but there wasn't anything. After I convinced myself there was no one there, I slowly walked the hall and shut that light off. Total darkness now, and I peeked out the porch window to see the door closed, locked and still in place. It was nobody. What did I hear? What came rushing at me? That was the day I became more an open-minded skeptic. I believed something without a physical form spoke to me and came towards me, and scared the ever-loving crap out of me. When I was 18, I moved in with my girlfriend Sarah. We were young, close, and I honestly jumped at the chance. Growing up, I'd heard stories. My mum had a few first-hand experiences she told me about, but I never witnessed anything myself. I figured most of this stuff was just imagination or misinterpretation, but that changed. Sarah told me there was something different about her house. It started small. The second night I spent at the house, I was completely passed out in bed when something tugged on my left foot hard enough to wake me. But I was half asleep, so I brushed it off. Probably a dream, I thought. Weeks passed, then months. But the house never felt quite right, especially towards the back where our bedroom and ensuite were located. There was always this presence. Not like being watched exactly, but like you were never truly alone. I asked Sarah if she knew what I meant. She did. She'd seen things, felt things. She even admitted she had recurring nightmares, demonic ones, but never went into detail, and I didn't push. The way she said it told me enough. And other things started happening that we couldn't explain. We'd come home, put our keys down either on the kitchen bench or coffee table, only to find them missing later. We'd tear through the house, looking for them, arguing lightly, thinking the other had moved them, but we never found them where we left them. Always something odd, something neither of us had touched. And just so you understand, Sarah wasn't the kind of person to lie or play tricks. She wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking, and this isn't a story she invented. It was a time before smartphones with cameras, so we had no real way to capture anything, and things escalated gradually. One night when I was in the shower, I stepped out and saw a shadow on the bathroom wall. At first, I assumed it was mine, but something was off. It was taller and narrower than me, and it was moving back and forth. I called Sarah in and she saw it too. We screamed and ran out the bathroom, and when we returned a few minutes later, it was gone. After that, we started praying before bed every night. Just simple protection prayers, but they didn't work. Whatever was in that house didn't care. Soon after, I started having nightmares, evil, heavy dreams that left me waking up drenched in sweat. One night was worse than anything I'd ever felt. I was trapped in sleep paralysis. I've had it before, but this time, it felt like something pressing down on me, like it wanted me dead. I tried to scream, to call out for Jesus, but nothing would come. I was panicking in my dream, desperately praying in my head. And suddenly I woke to Sarah shaking me. I told her I was trying to call for Jesus and that I was praying. She just stared at me pale. "That's not what I heard," she whispered. "It sounded like evil whispering coming from your mouth." That scared the crap out of me. And her saying it, hearing the fear in her voice, made it so much worse. From that point on, everything felt heavy. We'd see this dark patch in the corner of our room, always in the same place. It never moved from the top right corner, just hung there waiting. Sometimes we'd see orbs too, bright, glowing lights that floated and vanished, weird fluctuations that had no source, and our bedroom was always cold. Then came the final straw. We were lying in bed one night with the lights off, but the glow of the streetlight bled faintly through the curtain. We weren't asleep, just lying there quietly not speaking. Then the orbs came. They started appearing on the ceiling, popping in and out of sight. Then the darkness dropped. And I mean darkness, thick and wrong, like something had siphoned the light out of the room entirely. The walls around us were suddenly coated in a darkness darker than dark. A black void, falling down all four walls like a curtain closing. "Are you seeing this?" I turned to Sarah and asked. She didn't even look at me, just said yes. I called out loud to Jesus this time. I remembered it got so cold in that moment our breath was visible in the air like smoke. We pulled a blanket over our head and waited. It didn't go right away, but eventually it faded. We never figured out why exactly this happened. All I know is whatever haunted that house, whatever fed off us in that room wasn't human, and it didn't care about our prayers, fear, or logic. It was already inside. I was attending a paranormal-themed convention in Savannah, Georgia. I was the vendor selling my spooky art and connecting with like-minded people, and meeting other paranormal enthusiasts like myself. It was a small but enjoyable event, including visiting some places in Savannah known to be haunted. I've been to visit Savannah several times, so I'm fairly familiar with its hauntings. However, this event gave us access to a place I'd never been to before, and have no intention of ever returning to. There's a not-so-well-received movie called A Savannah Haunting. You'll probably be able to find it on some streaming platforms, but watch at your own risk. The movie isn't cursed or anything, it's just bad. The house it was filmed in stands to this day. It is indeed owned by the man who filmed the movie. This convention came with access to investigate the house. My paranormal team consisted of my family members. They helped me at the convention center, and we all attended the investigation at the house. It's a place we'd never been to before. I remember us agreeing, why not see what's in store? And for context, I am something of a medium. And after embracing that, I've become pretty immune to being rattled by hauntings. I've seen lots of strange things. My mentors in the field have told me that I'm quite a magnet for what you'll call inhuman entities. I've seen shadow people since my early teens, and encountered many a strange thing. And I tell you all of this so that you know whatever is in that house was something that genuinely scared me. In the infamous words of Lauren Warren, this is as close to hell as I ever want to get. The house is out of the main city. It is close to a highway, but for some reason it looks like it's smack dab in the middle of nowhere. There are large trees all around it, and the driveway leading up to the home is long, further adding to the sense of isolation. The house is huge. It's 2 stories tall plus a basement, and it somehow seems even larger on the inside. There's a staircase to the right as soon as you walk into the main room of the house, and one of those backless open staircases that you'd expect someone to stick a hand through and grab your ankle as you're ascending the steps. The start of the investigation went fine. We received some basic history of the home from the man who owns it, William McCullen. He claimed he was reluctant to allow people to investigate because he had some issues in the past. He told us the story of how he had had the home cleansed and blessed to remove the negative energy a while back, and the kind people had even set up a spiritual barrier to prevent the negative things from coming back into the home. However, one group of so-called paranormal investigators had performed a seance in the house behind his back. This had brought in something new. The owner was a bit of an odd man. Upon reflecting upon this whole investigation, we believe that whatever is calling this home its territory is harming him mentally and physically. You might be wondering why this man let investigators into his home after all of this. Honestly, we were wondering the same thing. I was up on the second story getting ready to go back into the fray of the investigation. I hadn't seen or felt much up at this point, so when the atmosphere suddenly shifted for the worse, I didn't see anything. When all of a sudden the people in the room with me became agitated with one another. You might recall my investigation team as my family, and I hate it when people get angry. It creates a pit in my stomach, and I must focus on my breathing. I don't know why, because I'm sensitive in the feeling department, but I've always been that way. Curt words were exchanged, and I remember feeling like somehow it was my fault. That pit of despair opened myself up to what I had been guarding from. I remember very little of how I got down the stairs. I know I was fighting this sudden sense of exhaustion like I would pass right out. Somehow I made it to the bottom of the steps and back into the main room of the house. What happened next comes to me in flashes. I know the lead investigator started an EVP session that had everyone else otherwise occupied. I know I was fighting to stand up. I think it wanted me to faint, so I very slowly lowered myself to the ground to sit, and then it struck. These thoughts that could not have been mine filled my head. Thoughts of ending it all and taking other people in the home with me. Thoughts of dark, depressing ideology, and how I, in particular, would be better off gone from this world. I remember trying to fight it, to say no, but I couldn't move and barely speak, and I couldn't form a thought that was my own. This went on for what felt like hours, but was probably just a few minutes. Finally, one of the lead investigators said something to me and I snapped back to reality. I don't remember what exactly, but I responded with something along the lines of, "I'm not okay." Another woman who had been quiet most of this time rushed to my aid. Turns out she was like me. I saw it for the first time when she helped me get back up. I turned to my left and there it was. It was too tall. It had to be hunched down to keep its head from hitting the ceiling. Its skin was like charcoal, and its body was too long. Its legs looked broken, or maybe double-jointed, and it was so thin it seemed like it had no muscle in its body. The horns that curved upon its head would have gorged the ceiling if it wanted to. But what stuck the most were its eyes. Mind you, this all happened in seconds, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one seeing this thing until the woman who helped me before confirms it too. It is gone just as quickly as it appeared. It skittered away in a manner like a spider and vanished. The woman who helped me perform a blessing on me, rebuilding my walls of protection and making sure the things couldn't get back to me. You'd think it would be the end, but no. That thing had the audacity to try and go after my mother. During the time I was struggling with my thoughts, she had been up on the second-floor balcony looking down into the main room. She told me that time had frozen for her, and from her vantage point, everything had simply stopped. When I was finally telling someone that I was not okay, time moved once more for her, and she was at my side in an instant. When the thing that had jumped me failed in its mission to latch onto me, it jumped to my mum. Luckily, that same woman who helped me blessed my mum, and as you can imagine, we didn't stay much longer after that. I can barely explain what happened to me when people ask. The thing that's in that house wanted me. Whether it wanted me to hitch a ride out, or for some other nefarious reason, I don't know. The worst thing about this story is that I know it's still out there. I know it's keeping an eye on me. I've been back to Savannah since this happened, and I swear I can catch glimpses of those piercing eyes peeking around dark corners at me. We bought the old Victorian house on the outskirts of town because it was cheap, secluded, and in the words of the realtor, full of character. My boyfriend was getting deployed soon, and I didn't want to live in a noisy apartment complex. The house felt really quiet. From the moment we moved in, I felt watched. At first, it was subtle. Lights I knew I would turn off would be on. Locked doors would open by themselves and creak. My boyfriend assumed I was just forgetful, until he started hearing me call his name while he was out in the yard. I'd be in the shower and hear his voice through the walls, urgently calling, "Come here, I need you." But every time I rushed out soaking wet, the house would be empty. He'd be nowhere near the home. At night, I'd fall asleep with the bedroom door slightly ajar, waiting for him to return from his night shift. Every single time without fail, he'd come back home to find the door locked from the inside. I'd swear I hadn't moved. He'd have to knock, and I'd wake up confused and chilled. It's like the house didn't want to let him in. The presence grew bolder after he left for deployment. It hated being ignored. It was Christmas Eve. Snow pressed against the windows like breath. The tree lights were on, flickering gently, and I was alone, nursing a glass of wine on the couch and trying not to cry. He hadn't called in days. Just as a tear slipped down my cheek, I heard a sound, delicate and intentional. A glass ornament detached itself from a branch, floated downwards like a feather, and landed on the hardwood floor without breaking. Then, in utter silence, it rolled across the thick Persian rug. It crept 4 feet, then stopped, right in front of my bare feet. There was no breeze, no vibration, just cold. It was the first of the many gifts. Days later, I found an old playing card tucked into the bathroom mirror frame. Queen of Spades. It was yellowed with torn edges, like it had survived a fire. I didn't own any deck of cards like that, so I put it in the trash. And that same night it reappeared, perched on the windowsill. Then, I burnt it in the fireplace. Then that night, I felt hands, cold and unseen, pressing my shoulders down while I was trying to sleep. I tried to scream, but it felt like water filled my mouth and something sat on my chest, pinning me in place. Inches from me, I saw a woman's distorted face. Her eyes were full of rage. I thrashed, and then I was free, gasping. It was one of the most scary and surreal moments of my life. We left the house a few months later, sold it fast and cheap. I didn't even care if we lost money. I just wanted out. Later we learned the last owner had been a reclusive woman who filled the house with cages, animals that were never seen outside. She'd lost her husband, then her mind, and vanished. No one knew she died in that house, but I think part of her stayed. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for joining me in tonight's Haunted House Stories. I would like to extend a huge thank you to my members and patrons, and if you would like your birthday shout-out, get exclusive material only available on Patreon, and a bunch of amazing perks, and to support me personally, feel free to check out the link in the description. Your support means a hell of a lot, so thanks guys. And I will be back tomorrow with some truly chilling attic stories. So that's it from me then guys. Stay awesome, and if you'd like to see more, links on screen now. Until next time though, be safe and good night.